There are moments in history where the past doesn't feel distant at all. It feels alive, breathing just beneath the surface of the world we think we understand. You sense it in the quiet hum of ancient stones, in the way submerged cities lie in perfect silence, in the impossible precision of monuments that predate memory. These fragments don't form a timeline, they form a warning. Because scattered across the ruins of lost epochs is a single recurring pattern. Humanity rises, humanity is erased, and those who survive rebuild with only echoes of what came before. Every civilization believes it is the first. Yet the fingerprints of a deeper world stain every continent, temples engineered with impossible accuracy. Maps drawn long before the lands they reveal were rediscovered. Skulls and bones that do not fit the neat ladder of human evolution. And myths, always the myths, repeating the same story in 1,000 tongues. A world that ended, a world that began again, and teachers who walked out of the darkness carrying memory like fire. Perhaps these are not stories. Perhaps they are instructions left behind by those who lived through the last fall. Tonight, we return to that forgotten threshold, the place where history fractures and something older begins to surface. A journey into ruins, legends, and drowned continents. A hunt for the civilization before civilization. Welcome to ARCHAEON. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. There are moments when the world feels as though it is holding its breath, when the silence around ancient monuments becomes so dense that it presses against the mind like an unseen weight. You stand before a ruin, and the air changes. It thickens, hums, vibrates softly as if the stones beneath your feet remember a story you were never taught. Maybe that feeling is not imagination. Maybe it is memory, not yours, but humanity's, buried under ages of forgetting. Because the deeper we dig, the stranger the past becomes. The timeline we were told to trust begins to warp, stretch, and crack. And what emerges through those cracks is a world older, wiser, and far less simple than the textbooks claim. History, as we are taught, begins with writing, but real history begins with loss. It begins with erasure, cities swallowed by the sea, knowledge turned to smoke, calendars rewritten, lineages broken, and entire civilizations reduced to fragments small enough to hide inside a museum drawer. We construct neat chronological ladders because chaos terrifies us, but the evidence scattered across deserts, mountains, jungles, and ocean floors refuses to obey that ladder. Instead, it points toward a forgotten epoch, a time before the stories we tell ourselves, a time when humanity rose, collapsed, and rose again. You can feel that forgotten world most clearly in places where precision defies explanation. Places where stone behaves like metal, where granite is carved as though it were clay, where blocks weighing hundreds of tons are lifted, fitted, and aligned with a mastery that mocks even our modern equipment. These ancient sites do not announce themselves with loud declarations. They whisper. They let geometry speak for them. They let erosion, alignment, and impossible craftsmanship carry their message. Puma Punku, for example, sits high on the Bolivian plateau, exposed to centuries of wind, earthquake, and sun. And yet its stones still retain angles crisp enough to cut a fingertip. Some blocks are shaped like perfect interlocking H's, crafted with a standardization that implies tools far beyond the copper chisels assigned to that era. Even more unsettling are the magnetic anomalies embedded within certain stones, suggesting intense heat or energetic events long before written history. The official story assigns Puma Punku to the Tiwanaku culture around 500 CE, but nothing about the site obeys that date. Its ruins whisper of a different age, a different technology, a different world. Across the sea, in Lebanon, Baalbek stands like a geological impossibility. 3 stones known as the Trilithon weigh roughly 800 tons each, resting upon even larger blocks beneath them. Engineers have tried to model the lifting process with modern cranes and machinery, and yet something always fails. The margins of error are too slim, the placement too perfect, the weight too unforgiving. The Romans built upon the site, yes, but they admitted they did not lay the foundation. They inherited it. They restored what was already ancient to them. What civilization moved those stones? Why? And how? The Sphinx of Egypt tells a similar story. Its body bears erosion scars not from sandstorms but from rainfall, heavy, persistent rainfall that has not fallen on the Giza Plateau for thousands of years. Geological evidence places parts of the Sphinx at a time when the Sahara was green, perhaps as far back as 7,000 BCE or earlier. Yet, acknowledging such age would unravel the carefully arranged chronology of Egyptian civilization, so the debate is quietly pushed aside. But the stones are patient. They continue to erode, to reveal, to insist. And then there is Göbekli Tepe, buried intentionally by the very people who built it. Carved pillars, animal reliefs, circular enclosures aligned with the stars, all predating pottery, agriculture, metal, and writing. According to the textbook timeline, humans at 9600 BCE were simple hunter-gatherers. They were not supposed to build monumental architecture or track celestial patterns. Yet here they did. And after they finished, they buried the entire complex under tons of soil, as if saving it for a future they knew would not remember them. Who were these early builders? What did they know? And why did they hide it? These places form a constellation of anomalies stretching across continents, each one challenging the simplicity of our historical narrative. When you connect them, the star alignments of Giza, the astronomical precision of Nabta Playa, the Cyclopean masonry of Peru, the vitrified forts of Scotland, a pattern emerges. Not one of isolated genius, but of shared memory. Different cultures, separated by oceans, echo the same architectural language, the same obsession with the stars, the same reverence for geometry, and the same near-mythical stories of teachers from an earlier age. It is this repetition that unsettles scholars. Coincidence becomes harder to defend when the same themes appear in civilizations that supposedly never met. Myths speak of beings who descended after a cataclysm to teach writing, agriculture, law, and astronomy. In Sumer, they are the Anunnaki. In Egypt, they are the gods of Zep Tepi. In Greece, the Titans and Prometheus. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl. In the Andes, Viracocha. Across Polynesia, the shining navigators who came from the sea. The names change, but their role does not. They are the bringers of knowledge after a world-ending event. And deep beneath many of these mythologies lies the memory of a flood. Not a symbolic flood, but a geological one. The Younger Dryas cataclysm, around 12,900 years ago, marked a sudden plunge into Ice Age conditions, followed by rapid warming that melted glaciers and raised sea levels by more than 100 meters. Coastlines vanished, river valleys filled, entire regions were submerged. If civilizations existed before that time, their remains now rest beneath the ocean floor. Our modern skepticism dismisses ancient flood stories as allegory, yet nearly every culture on Earth remembers the same event. The world drowned, knowledge was lost, and only a few survived. The alignment between myth and geology is too precise to ignore. Meltwater pulses, extinction layers, charred horizons, shock-fractured minerals. The Earth remembers what humanity forgot. Perhaps this is why certain underwater discoveries provoke so much discomfort. The submerged structures off the coast of India near Dwarka challenge the accepted timeline of civilization on the subcontinent. The Yonaguni monument near Japan displays terraced formations suspiciously geometric to be natural. The deep water anomalies off Cuba show patterns that should not exist at depths formed only after glacial melting. Each time such discoveries surface, there is a rush to classify them as natural coincidences, misidentifications, or inconvenient mirages. But what if they are exactly what they appear to be? Ruins of a world erased by rising seas. Humanity's memory is selective. It remembers stories that comfort and forgets stories that destabilize. But the planet does not forget. It holds everything in sediment, ice cores, tectonic scars, and drowned coastlines. It preserves evidence without agenda. And when that evidence is uncovered, it reminds us that our obsession with being the first, the peak, the pinnacle, is a fragile illusion. We are simply one chapter in a much longer book, a book of civilizations rising and falling in cycles measured not in centuries, but in millennia. The ancients encoded this cyclical worldview not only in myth, but in their architecture. Many megalithic sites are aligned not only to the sun and moon, but to celestial configurations occurring tens of thousands of years apart, configurations that would require continuous observation far beyond the lifespan of a single culture. The Great Pyramids mirror the stars of Orion as they appeared in 10,500 BCE. The temple complexes of Angkor Wat reflect the constellation Draco. Stone circles in Africa mark the rising of Sirius. These alignments are too precise for chance and too ancient for known civilizations to have charted, unless they inherited the knowledge. There is another form of inheritance, artifacts and bones that do not fit neatly within our understanding of humanity's development. Elongated skulls, anomalous skeletal remains, tools too advanced for their assigned era, genetic anomalies hinting at interbreeding with unknown hominins. Some are dismissed as hoaxes, others quietly disappear into museum backrooms, their existence reduced to anecdote. But the pattern persists. Evidence surfaces that suggests humanity is not a single linear line, but a branching tree with forgotten limbs. And beneath all of this lies a deeper question, one that most scholars shy away from because it risks unraveling the foundation of our modern identity. What if humanity is not as young as we think? What if we are a recovering species, not an ascending one? What if the reason ancient structures feel so impossibly advanced is not because early civilizations achieved sudden leaps of genius, but because they were rebuilding from fragments, echoing a knowledge passed down from survivors of an earlier age? Picture a world before the sea swallowed coastlines, before the ice melted, before the sky darkened with debris from a cosmic impact. A world with cities near shores that no longer exist, with monuments now hidden beneath waves, with seafaring cultures navigating by stars we have forgotten to read. Imagine that those people watched their world collapse. Floods rising, fires sweeping, mountains breaking, the sky turning violent. Imagine the survivors fleeing inland, carrying stories of what they once knew. Their descendants, scattered across continents, would later tell tales of gods from the sea, shining beings from the sky, and lost homelands consumed by water. These stories survive as myth because myth is how memory travels when writing is gone. But the stones do not forget. The ocean floor does not lie. The anomalies do not vanish. They accumulate, grain by grain, clue by clue, until they form a picture that no longer looks like the history we were taught. And perhaps the most haunting realization is this: the anomalies are not rare. They are everywhere. They are the rule we refuse to see, not the exception. Every continent hides a chapter of the same forgotten book. Every ruin hums with a message from a world before ours. And if we listen long enough, if we stop forcing the past to fit the shape of our expectations, we might begin to hear what those ancient stones have been whispering all along: that humanity has lived many times, died many times, and remembered only fragments each time it returned. This is not a story of arrogance or fantasy. It is a story of humility, a reminder that we walk on the bones of many worlds. We inherit knowledge we do not fully understand. We marvel at achievements we believe were our own. But the truth is more complex, more mysterious, and far older. The Earth is a palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten across ages, each layer leaving traces under the next. We are simply the latest authors of a story that began long before we arrived. And as we peer deeper into that story, across deserts, under oceans, and into the geological memories of the planet itself, we are left with a single unsettling realization: the past is not past. It is still here, buried under sand, submerged under water, encoded in myth, etched in stone, waiting patiently for us to remember. If you stand at the edge of certain ruins long enough, you begin to realize that ancient civilizations did not look up at the sky the way we do. For us, the heavens are a distant spectacle, stars pinned to the darkness, admired but detached from daily life. To the ancients, the sky was not background. It was blueprint, teacher, and warning. Every sunrise, every solstice, every shifting constellation carried meaning, as if the universe itself were speaking in patterns across the night. And when you walk among the ruins they left behind, you begin to understand a truth our age has forgotten. To them, the sky was memory. It is one thing to look at a star. It is another thing entirely to align a monument of millions of tons of stone so perfectly with its position that more than 10,000 years later the orientation still holds. Yet this is exactly what we find across continents. Civilizations separated by oceans, by millennia, by language and climate, all tracking the movements of the heavens with precision that challenges everything we assume about their capabilities. The Great Pyramids at Giza align with Orion's belt, not symbolically, mathematically. The angle of the constellation as it appeared around 10,500 BCE, a date long before Egypt's first pharaohs, perfectly mirrors the placement of the three pyramids. Nabta Playa, an ancient stone circle hidden beneath the sands of the Sahara, marks the rising of Sirius with exactness that rivals modern observatories. Göbekli Tepe's animal carvings appear to record constellations, as if the builders were not decorating stone, but archiving the sky itself. Even more unsettling is the way this knowledge surfaces again and again in places where mainstream history insists it should not exist. In the Peruvian Andes, the massive stone structures of Tiwanaku and the Gate of the Sun encode astronomical cycles that would have required centuries of observation. In Mexico, the serpentine shadow that descends the pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza during the equinox is not an accident. It is choreography, architecture designed to move with the sky. When you map these alignments together, you begin to see the outlines of an ancient world view that did not distinguish between earth and heaven. To them, the stars were not distant. They were a mirror of the world below, a cosmic map reflecting human destiny. Cities, temples, and monuments were built in imitation of the heavens, as if aligning with the universe could anchor a civilization to something eternal. But why such obsession? Why build monuments to mirror the sky? Why carve constellations into stone? Why measure precession, planetary cycles, and stellar movements long before telescopes existed? The deeper you look, the harder it becomes to dismiss these acts as superstition or coincidence. There is a deliberate intelligence behind them, a kind of ancestral memory, or perhaps ancestral inheritance, that carried knowledge across epochs. Consider the precision of the Great Pyramid itself. For thousands of years, it stood as the most accurate north-facing structure on the planet. Its deviation from true north is so tiny that even with modern tools we struggle to replicate it. The monument's height multiplied by a specific factor equals the distance from Earth to the Sun. Its perimeter corresponds to Earth's circumference. Its layout encodes the ratio of pi with astonishing accuracy. These are not coincidences born of chance. They are fingerprints of a lost understanding of the cosmos. Ancient builders across the world knew the wobble of Earth's axis, the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete. This is not something a single culture could discover in one lifetime. It requires long-term observation across generations. And yet civilizations separated by continents shared this knowledge. The Egyptians encoded it in their temples. The Maya embedded it in the long-count calendar. The builders of Angkor mirrored the constellation Draco as it appeared thousands of years before their time. How did they know? From whom did they learn? The simplest explanation is that they inherited it. Civilizations often begin with sudden sophistication. Complex calendars, advanced architecture, astronomical mastery, appearing abruptly without a trail of primitive development behind them. The Sumerians, for example, emerged with writing, agriculture, mathematics, and law almost overnight. Egyptian dynastic culture appeared with engineering principles that seemed too advanced for its age. The Indus Valley civilization constructed cities with standardized weights, measurements, drainage systems, and urban planning from the very beginning. Humanity does not develop in straight lines. We rise, forget, relearn. But the consistency of these early leaps hints at more than rediscovery. It hints at instruction. Many ancient cultures preserved stories of teachers, luminous beings, sky visitors, or survivors from a previous age who arrived after a great catastrophe to restore knowledge. Scholars dismiss these as myth, yet the pattern repeats with unnerving regularity. It is almost as if the fabric of civilization carries a residue of something older. This residue becomes even more apparent when you trace patterns in ancient architecture. Across continents, the same construction techniques appear. Megalithic blocks fitted with interlocking joints, polygonal walls that resist earthquakes, precision stonework so fine that even modern lasers struggle to measure the seams. Sites like Sacsayhuaman in Peru, Easter Island's Moai platforms, and the ARCHAEON at Abydos share architectural signatures that suggest a shared lineage or shared memory. Then there is the enigma of materials. Many ancient structures are built from limestone, basalt, granite, and quartz-rich stone, materials that resonate with sound and electromagnetic vibration. Temples in Malta hum at specific frequencies. Chambers in the Great Pyramid generate standing waves. Stone circles amplify voice like instruments. The ancients were not just building shelters or monuments. They were constructing acoustic technologies, energetic devices, harmonic structures, architecture that interacted with human consciousness. This understanding of vibration shows up in myths as well. Nearly every creation story speaks of the universe emerging from sound. The Hindu Om vibrating existence into being. The Egyptian god Ta speaking creation with his tongue. The Greek concept of logos as divine word. What modern science calls frequency and resonance, the ancients encoded in stories of gods and creation. Their myths are not superstition. They are metaphorical science, preserved through poetic language. What is even more remarkable is how these metaphors connect across cultures. Serpent symbolism, for example, appears nearly everywhere. The feathered serpent of Mesoamerica, the Naga of India, the Quetzalcoatl of the Maya, the dragons of China, the rainbow serpent of Australia. The serpent represents knowledge, cycles, and cosmic duality. But it also resembles the waveform of vibration, the spiral of DNA, the shape of energy moving through space. Did ancient cultures intuitively grasp these concepts? Or did they inherit them from a forgotten world where such knowledge was commonplace? Some researchers have suggested that DNA itself acts as a biological record, preserving traces of ancient memory through genetic inheritance. While mainstream science interprets this metaphorically, ancient myths interpret it literally. Humans descended from gods or advanced ancestors, carrying fragments of their knowledge within. The Dogon tribe of Mali, for instance, possess astronomical knowledge about Sirius B, an invisible star requiring modern telescopes, and claim it was given by beings called the Nomo. Their traditions predate contact with Western science. There is a point at which dismissing these patterns becomes less rational than acknowledging them. When dozens of cultures remember sky teachers, when monuments encode astronomical knowledge beyond the capabilities of their supposed builders, when myths align with geological events, when architecture resonates with harmonic precision, when underwater ruins appear at depths consistent with post-Ice Age sea level rise. At some point, the simplest explanation is that humanity survived a collapse and rebuilt using fragments of what remained. This idea is not comfortable. It contradicts the narrative of unbroken progress. It implies vulnerability, the possibility that our modern world is not the pinnacle, but just another cycle. But the evidence does not depend on belief. The alignment of the pyramids does not vanish when ignored. The sonar scans of submerged cities do not disappear. The geological scars of cataclysm do not lie. We tend to view ancient ruins as relics, but they are warnings carved in stone. They remind us that civilizations can fall suddenly, violently, irreversibly. They remind us that humanity has been humbled before. They remind us that knowledge preserved in myth may not be fantasy, but inheritance. Perhaps this is why so many ancient structures emphasize cycles, solstices, equinoxes, lunar phases, precession, cosmic rhythms. These cycles track not only celestial movements, but environmental changes, shifts in climate, patterns of drought and flood, the slow creep toward another cataclysm. The ancients may have used astronomy not to predict the seasons, but to predict resets. They may have built stone calendars not as temples of worship, but as instruments of survival. Imagine living through a world-ending event. Imagine watching coastlines drown, forests burn, and the sky darken. Imagine losing libraries, cities, languages, and memory itself. What would you leave behind for the next age? Stone. Only stone survives. You would build monuments aligned with the sky to preserve knowledge across dark ages. You would encode cycles of time into architecture. You would carve warnings into symbols. You would bury temples to protect them from destruction. You would pass stories of gods and teachers because metaphor survives when fact does not. And then, thousands of years later, another civilization, ours, would look upon those ruins and call them primitive. But they were not primitive. They were survivors. Survivors of a world that ended. Survivors who preserved memory in the only form that time cannot erase. Survivors who built, not to glorify themselves, but to warn those who would come after. When you view ancient sites through this lens, everything changes. The pyramids become pages of a book. Stone circles become star maps. Underwater ruins become chapters torn from memory. And myth becomes the last surviving trace of a world that drowned. Modern science, for all its brilliance, often forgets that data without imagination cannot reveal meaning. A monument is not just a pile of stone. A myth is not just a story. A star alignment is not just a coincidence. Together they form a narrative, one that stretches beyond written history, beyond archaeology, beyond comfort. A narrative that suggests humanity has lived through cycles of rise and collapse, each one leaving behind fragments for the next. And now, as the climate shifts, as magnetic poles wander, as oceans warm, as patterns repeat, you can feel that ancient rhythm stirring again. The same pulse that guided the builders of Göbekli Tepe, the same fear that carved flood stories into clay tablets, the same memory that pushed survivors to align monuments with the heavens. What they preserved was not superstition. It was survival. And if we learn to listen, really listen, to what they left behind, we may discover that their messages were not meant for their time. They were meant for ours. If the land remembers in ruins, then the sea remembers in silence. Everything we know about history is biased toward what survived above water. Yet most of the world's ancient coastlines, the places where early civilizations almost certainly lived, now lie beneath hundreds of feet of ocean. We map our past with deserts and river valleys, forgetting that before the last great melt, the sea was 100 meters lower. Human settlements existed where waves break today. Entire cultures thrived on plains now hidden under miles of salt and darkness. And when the ice sheets collapsed 12,000 years ago, the ocean consumed all of it. What we call prehistory is simply the part we have not yet retrieved from the deep. Divers and sonar technicians have been finding anomalies for decades, though most of the discoveries sink quickly into obscurity, labeled too controversial or too inconvenient. But the ocean keeps everything, and it keeps it well. Unlike fire, which destroys, water preserves. Structures collapse slowly under sediment. Walls remain intact. Pottery, carvings, tools, all linger in the cold quiet, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. One of the earliest whispers came from the coast of India, near modern Dwarka. Local fishermen had long spoken of strange shapes beneath the waves, walls, pillars, patterns that did not belong to nature. When sonar mapping finally swept the area, it revealed grids of streets stretching for miles, foundations of circular temples, stone platforms arranged with intentional symmetry. Archaeologists first dismissed them as natural formations. They always do. But then divers recovered pottery, anchors, sculpted blocks, artifacts later dated to around 9,000 years ago. That number is gentle, conservative. Many believe the structures are older still, perhaps belonging to a culture lost during the last catastrophic sea rise. The myths of Dwarka call it a city of gods, a shining place swallowed by the sea in a single night. Scholars label that story as legend, but legend has a way of preserving memory when history fails. When every river valley in India was reborn after the melt, when ocean levels surged across the land, when survivors fled inland with nothing but stories, is it so hard to imagine those stories taking the shape of myth? Half a world away, off the shores of Japan's Yonaguni Island, another enigma startled divers in the 1980s. Massive terraces carved into rock, steps and platforms descending into the sea like a drowned citadel. Some claim the formation is natural. Others argue it is too precise, the angles too sharp, the edges too deliberate, the orientation too perfect. One thing is certain. The monument now lies far below the surface, at a depth that places its construction before the last glacial melt. Whether a temple, fortress, or ceremonial complex, it existed when sea levels were drastically lower. The ocean did not carve those shapes. People did. People we no longer remember. Even more unsettling are the structures discovered off the western coast of Cuba in 2001. Sonar detected massive geometric shapes on the seabed, pyramids, plazas, roads, arranged across several square kilometers. The formations lie almost 700 meters underwater, far deeper than any known culture could have built during recorded history. At that depth, the structures must predate the end of the last ice age. But acknowledging this would disrupt the entire model of human development in the Americas. And so the site remains largely untouched, locked between scientific caution and political hesitation. There are reasons these discoveries stir discomfort. They suggest that humanity was building cities long before the earliest accepted civilizations. They imply that advanced societies existed during the late Ice Age, societies with architecture, urban planning, and maritime capability. They hint at a forgotten chapter of human history, erased by the most devastating environmental shift our species ever endured. The Younger Dryas, that violent, abrupt return to Ice Age conditions around 12,900 years ago, ended with equally abrupt warming. Ice sheets cracked, meltwater surged, oceans rose more than 100 meters, coastlines drowned across every continent, whole regions vanished. If civilizations existed along those ancient shores, their ruins now lie deep beneath the waves, unreachable by casual archaeology. But the sea reveals fragments. Off Malta's coast, divers found megalithic stone structures submerged at depths inconsistent with the dating of the island's temples. Off the coast of Egypt, near Alexandria, archaeologists uncovered the sunken city of ARCHAEON, once mythologized, now proven. In the North Sea, the lost land of Doggerland, once a vast plain connecting Britain to Europe, lies beneath layers of silt and bone. Tools, hearths, animal remains, even human skeletons have been pulled from those waters, showing that thousands lived on lands now erased from every map. These discoveries do not represent isolated anomalies. They form a global pattern. Civilizations living along fertile coasts during the Ice Age, rapid flooding, survivors fleeing inland, memories of destruction encoded into myths of deluge and rebirth. Nearly every culture remembers a great flood. Sumerians, Greeks, Maya, Chinese, indigenous Australians, Polynesians, Egyptians, Hebrews, and many more. The details differ, but the events align. A rising sea, a drowned world, a remnant of survivors carrying fragments of knowledge into the next age. Plato's account of Atlantis is often dismissed as allegory, yet its timeline, 9,000 years before Solon, aligns eerily with the end of the last ice age. He describes an advanced maritime civilization destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe. The source of the story: Egyptian priests, who preserved older memories in their temple records. Plato did not invent Atlantis. He recorded a memory passed down through cultures older than Athens itself. Whether Atlantis was a real location or a symbol representing many drowned cultures, the consistency of the story points to a shared trauma. And that trauma is not mythic. It is geological fact. But the most unsettling discoveries lie not in shallow waters, but in the abyss. Sonar mapping in recent decades has revealed entire submerged landscapes, river channels beneath the Mediterranean, canyons under the Black Sea, vast plateaus beneath Southeast Asia. The continental shelf is a graveyard of human prehistory, hundreds of miles of ancient land lost beneath the waves. And where there is land, there were people. The ocean does not erase with violence, it buries with patience. Over millennia, artifacts settle into sediment. Walls collapse slowly, entire cities become reefs. When divers explore such places, the silence is immense. Not empty, but heavy, like a cathedral holding its breath. You can almost feel the weight of memory pressing through the water, whispering of lives lived when the sea was far away. Modern technology has allowed glimpses through this watery veil. LiDAR, sonar, photogrammetry, autonomous submersibles all reveal shapes nature does not create on its own. Rectangles, circles, perfect alignments, terraces, stairways, causeways, road grids. These are the fingerprints of intention. Someone built them, someone lived there, and someone lost everything when the ocean rose. The question is not whether ancient civilizations existed before the flood. The evidence now leans heavily toward yes. The question is how advanced they were, and how much of their knowledge survived. The sudden appearance of agriculture, astronomy, architecture, and writing after 10,000 BCE may not have been invention at all. It may have been remembrance. Humanity rebuilding from fragments of a much older world. Imagine standing on an ancient shoreline as the ice sheets melt. Imagine watching the horizon creep closer each year, swallowing fields, villages, temples. Imagine hearing stories from elders about cities now deep beneath the waves. Imagine fleeing inland, carrying only what you can remember, teaching your children myths that encode real history, the flood, the star teachers, the lost homeland. Over generations, the details blur. The names change, but the memory survives. This is why so many flood myths include divine intervention, gods warning chosen individuals, instructing them to preserve knowledge, building arks or boats or rafts. These tales likely began as practical accounts, leaders gathering families, storing seeds, recording astronomical cycles, preserving tools, escaping disaster. But as centuries passed, memory transformed into myth. The survivors became heroes. The catastrophe became judgment. The homeland became paradise lost. And their children, generations later, looked back on what little knowledge survived and thought it had come from the heavens. It is easy to dismiss myths as metaphor. It is harder to ignore the consistency of their timelines. Nearly all flood stories place the destruction at the end of an age, followed by the rise of a new world. Geological evidence matches this exactly. The Younger Dryas ending, the massive meltwater pulse, the sudden rise of ocean temperatures all point to a planetary reset between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. When you combine this geology with underwater ruins, astronomical alignments, unexplained leaps in early civilizations, and the global repetition of ancestral memories, the pieces begin to form something coherent. Humanity did not start from scratch 6,000 years ago, as textbooks imply. Humanity rebooted. And if that is true, then underwater ruins are not anomalies. They are remnants of a forgotten era. They are the missing chapters of our story, chapters written not on paper but in stone, now lost beneath the sea. Some researchers believe the ocean still holds civilizations far more complex than any we have found on land. The reason is simple. Early humans settled near water. Rivers, deltas, coasts, these were lifelines. During the Ice Age, coastlines extended far beyond today's boundaries. When the melt came, everything along those ancient shores vanished beneath the rising tides. What we see on land, Göbekli Tepe, Jericho, ancient Egypt, may not be the beginning, but the remnants of inland cultures that survived the flood. The true first cities may lie underwater. The thought is humbling. It means that our entire understanding of history is built on the tiny fraction of evidence that escaped drowning. It means that civilizations we have never imagined may still be sleeping beneath layers of sediment, waiting for the right technology or the right moment to be rediscovered. And perhaps the most haunting possibility of all is this. Those civilizations may have understood things we no longer do. They may have watched the sky with knowledge born of long-term cycles. They may have tracked solar rhythms, magnetic shifts, climate patterns. They may have foreseen the flood long before it came, leaving behind warnings encoded in myth and stone. They may have built monuments meant to survive the next collapse. But the sea swallowed their cities, their libraries, their observatories, their writings, their science. We inherited their memories as stories, their knowledge as symbols, their warnings as legends. And in time, we forgot that these legends had roots. The ocean is patient, it waits. One day, perhaps centuries from now, the water will yield what it has kept. A city intact enough to erase every doubt, a library sealed in silt, a monument that predates every known culture, and when that day comes, history will shift. The mirror we have held to ourselves will crack, revealing a face older than we imagined. Until then, we listen to the silence beneath the waves, not empty, but waiting, like a deep breath held by a world that remembers everything we have forgotten. Before humans carved stories into stone, they spoke them into the air. Long before alphabets or tablets, before clay was impressed with wedges or temples echoed with chants, language itself was sacred. It was not merely communication, it was creation. Every ancient myth begins not with a spark or a god lifting mountains from chaos, but with sound. The universe vibrates, the world unfolds, and humanity learns to speak in rhythm with the cosmos. Somewhere in the deep past, the first voices rose not as words, but as resonance, tones that merged meaning with emotion, memory with breath. And when that resonance was finally carved into script, it arrived not as a clumsy beginning, but as a sudden appearance of complexity, as if writing were not invented but remembered. The oldest known writing, Sumerian cuneiform, appears around 3200 BCE in what is now Iraq. But the strange thing about cuneiform is not its age, it is its perfection. From its earliest examples, the system is already fully formed. Grammar, numbers, trade records, astronomical observations, laws. There are no earlier scribbles, no experimental symbols, no progression from simple to complex. Writing emerges suddenly, like a memory resurfacing. The same pattern appears in Egypt, where hieroglyphs arrive fully developed, their artistic and linguistic structures mature from the start. In the Indus Valley, an undeciphered script appears on seals, tools, and pottery, again without a visible origin. In China, the oracle bones of the Shang dynasty show the same abrupt sophistication. How can so many civilizations leap simultaneously into literacy without leaving a trail of evolution behind them? How can symbols appear across continents with shared geometric logic? The answer offered by mainstream history is coincidence, but coincidence begins to feel thin when the pattern repeats across millennia. These systems look less like inventions and more like inheritances, fragments of a symbolic language older than any nation, older than the flood myths, that echo through every corner of the world. The Tartaria tablets discovered in Romania in the 1960s provide a haunting clue. These small clay discs, dated to roughly 5300 BCE, bear markings strikingly similar to Sumerian proto-writing, yet they are 2 millennia older. Scholars debate whether they represent true writing or ritual symbols, but their symmetry, repetition, and contextual patterns suggest communication far beyond simple decoration. If they are writing, then literacy began not in Mesopotamia, but in a forgotten culture deep within prehistoric Europe. If they are not writing, then they are something even more intriguing, remnants of a symbolic language shared across ancient worlds. This idea parallels linguistic studies tracing modern tongues to hypothetical proto-languages. The Indo-European family stretches from India to Ireland, linked through common roots. Afro-Asiatic languages span the Middle East and North Africa. The Sino-Tibetan family reaches across East Asia. But beneath all these lies something older, a conceptual ancestor researchers call Nostratic, a reconstructed proto-language that may have emerged during the late Ice Age. Its remnants appear in words for water, earth, sky, God, light, primal concepts, as if early humanity once spoke a shared vocabulary long before continents scattered our voices. Ancient myths preserve this idea as well. The story of the Tower of Babel describes a time when humanity shared one language, only to lose it in a sudden catastrophe. It is traditionally read as allegory. Yet when compared with global flood narratives, the story feels less metaphorical and more like a recollection of cultural fragmentation after a disaster. A scattering of survivors whose shared tongue fractured into new dialects as they rebuilt their world. Symbols from ancient cultures reinforce this concept of shared memory. The spiral appears in Europe, the Pacific, and the Americas as a symbol of cycles and creation. The serpent symbolizes knowledge, rebirth, and cosmic duality from Mesoamerica to Mesopotamia. The triskelion, the sun cross, the world tree, the winged disk, these motifs repeat across civilizations separated by oceans and thousands of years. Their meanings overlap with uncanny precision, as though they descend from a symbolic grammar older than recorded history. The Indus Valley script remains one of the greatest linguistic mysteries. Over 4,000 short inscriptions have been found, carved on seals, pottery, and tools. Scholars cannot decipher them, not because they are meaningless, but because the language behind them has vanished. There is no Rosetta Stone for the Indus world, no bilingual inscription to bridge ancient symbols with known phonetics. Yet the script shows clear signs of structure, with repeated patterns suggesting syntax, grammar, even metaphors. Some researchers note similarities between its symbols and early Sumerian pictographs, hinting at cultural exchange before either region developed writing formally. Others believe the script is a surviving branch of a symbolic system older than both civilizations. The idea becomes even more compelling when viewed through the lens of ancient mythology. In Egypt, the god Thoth is said to have given writing to humanity to preserve wisdom after a great flood. In Sumer, the god Enki entrusted the Mi, tablets of knowledge containing the laws and foundations of civilization, to the first kings. In Hindu tradition, Saraswati embodies speech itself, birthing the universe through the sacred sound of Vak. In nearly every culture, writing is portrayed not as invention, but revelation, a rediscovery of forgotten truth. And perhaps that is exactly what it was. Yet the oldest form of language may not be written at all. It may be vibrational. Ancient temples across the world appear deliberately engineered to produce acoustic effects that alter perception. In the Hypogeum of Malta, a chant at 110 hertz sends waves through the stone, creating trance-like states. In the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber, certain frequencies generate harmonic fields that ripple through granite. Stone circles amplify human voice into rhythmic pulses. Why would ancient builders design monuments to hum? Why tune stone chambers to specific frequencies? Why construct architecture that resonates like musical instruments? Modern physics offers a simple explanation. Everything in the universe vibrates. Matter is not solid. It is a symphony of frequencies. If the ancients understood this intuitively, or inherited the knowledge, then language was more than communication. It was a bridge between the physical and the unseen. Early scripts may have been attempts to capture vibration, to translate sound into symbol. Chanting in temples may have been a way to align human consciousness with cosmic rhythms. This is not fantasy. It is measurable. When scientists tested the acoustics of Malta's Hypogeum, they found that certain tones caused hemispheric synchronization in the brain, aligning left and right activity into a unified pattern. Such states are associated with meditation, intuition, and altered perception. Ancient priests may have used sound to induce visionary states, believing they were communicating with gods. But perhaps they were activating parts of the brain long dormant, reconnecting with a deeper layer of awareness. Even more intriguing are the materials used in ancient structures. Quartz-rich stone, such as granite, responds strongly to vibration and electromagnetic fields. When compressed, quartz produces electric energy, the same principle used in modern radio equipment. Many megalithic sites use quartz intentionally, as if the builders knew how sound interacts with stone. The idea that such knowledge could emerge spontaneously in multiple ancient cultures seems unlikely. It suggests inheritance. We see echoes of this ancestral understanding in spiritual traditions around the world. Tibetan monks chant harmonic tones that alter brain waves. Indigenous shamans use vocal rhythms to enter trance states. The Kabbalah assigns numerical values to letters, believing creation itself resonates through sound. These are not isolated developments. They are remnants of a global, ancient science of vibration. If early writing systems were attempts to capture sound, then perhaps the first languages were not spoken in the way we think. They may have been tonal, harmonic, or vibrational, aligning human voices with energetic frequencies. Some researchers speculate that ancient languages were capable of effects we would now call metaphysical, calming storms, healing the body, shifting consciousness. While such ideas fall outside conventional science, they resonate with legends from every culture, the words of the gods, the language of creation, the songs that move mountains. Consider the strange symmetry of myths in which gods create the world by speaking. Egyptian priests believed that names held power, that knowing the true name of a being granted control over it. The Hebrew tradition speaks of a word so sacred it cannot be uttered. Indigenous cultures across the world believe that chanting certain sounds can call forth spirits or awaken natural forces. These myths may be poetic, but they may also reflect a lost truth. That language once had a potency we have forgotten. Modern science, ironically, is beginning to rediscover this. Cymatics, the study of how sound shapes matter, reveals that vibration can organize particles into complex geometric patterns. Sound can lift objects through acoustic levitation. Frequency can alter biological tissue, induce healing, or break structures apart. The universe hums at a fundamental frequency known as the Schumann resonance, and human brain waves synchronize with it. These discoveries are described as cutting-edge, yet they echo concepts preserved in myths thousands of years old. If ancient civilizations understood vibration, even partially, then their languages, spoken and symbolic, were not merely tools. They were technologies encoded in sound, stone, and myth. Technologies that allowed early humanity to perceive reality in ways we no longer do. Technologies that may have been passed down from a lost world before the cataclysm. This brings us back to writing. The earliest scripts may have been attempts to preserve this knowledge. A symbolic record of frequencies, patterns, cosmic cycles. A way to keep memory alive after disaster. When the flood swept across the world, when cities drowned and libraries were lost, when survivors scattered, what remained was myth, portable, adaptable, resilient. Written language emerged not as invention, but as reconstruction, a step toward recovering what had been forgotten. And perhaps the most haunting idea is this. Humanity did not lose writing once. We may have lost it many times. Each cycle of destruction erased knowledge, leaving fragments for the next age to piece together. Each civilization rediscovered writing in its own way, not knowing it was reenacting an older, deeper memory. Each script was a translation of something older, something preserved in the collective unconscious. We see hints of this in the sudden appearance of symbolic thinking in early humans, cave paintings, carved figurines, ritual objects. These do not feel like experiments. They feel like expressions of memory resurfacing after trauma. The same geometric patterns appear in Paleolithic art from Europe to Australia. The same handprints on cave walls. The same spirals carved into bone and stone. These motifs echo through tens of thousands of years, as if humanity were trying to remember a language older than speech. Writing did not begin at Sumer. It began in myth, in vibration, in the resonance between mind and world. The scripts we know, cuneiform, hieroglyphs, the Indus seals, are remnants of a much older process, one that began when humanity first listened to the universe and tried to echo its rhythm. Today, we think of language as symbolic, intellectual, disconnected from the body. But to the ancients, language was breath, vibration, energy. It shaped reality. It preserved memory. It linked the human mind to the cosmos. It was not a tool. It was a bridge. And somewhere beneath our modern tongues, beneath layers of evolution and forgetting, that ancient resonance still hums. It waits in the human voice, in the geometry of our symbols, in the myths that refuse to die. It waits for us to remember that language, true language, is not merely spoken. It is felt. It is lived. It is sung. What humanity calls the gift of writing may not have been a gift at all. It may have been a reminder, a spark of memory from a world lost to water and time, a world where sound was sacred, where symbols were cosmic, where language was the heartbeat of creation. And perhaps, if we listen closely to what remains, to the vibrations in ancient chambers, to the patterns in forgotten scripts, to the echo of myth across continents, we can begin to recover that memory. We can begin to hear the universe again, not as distant stars, but as resonance within ourselves. The earth keeps its own memory, but it does not speak in words. It speaks in bone. Beneath the soil and stone, beneath layers of dust and time, lie the remnants of lives that challenge the story we have told ourselves about who we are. Evolution, according to textbooks, is a ladder, simple to complex, primitive to advanced. But bones do not climb ladders. They scatter, erode, contradict. They emerge unexpectedly in mines, riverbeds, caves, deserts, and forgotten burial mounds, bearing shapes and proportions that do not fit the tidy narrative of human ascent. Some are too large, some too old, some too strange. Many disappear, but enough remain to whisper a question older than history. How many kinds of human walked this planet before us? Archaeologists have spent centuries uncovering skeletal remains across every continent, yet the record remains chaotic. For every neat evolutionary branch, there are fractures, species that should not exist, hybrids that defy classification, individuals whose sizes are anomalous, skulls elongated beyond cultural deformation, jaws too robust, cranial volumes too large, bones too massive. Most are dismissed as errors, misidentifications, or hoaxes, but patterns do not vanish simply because they are inconvenient. They persist, whispering from the edges of accepted science. In the late 19th century, newspapers across the United States reported discoveries that today sound like fantasies. skeletons 8 to 10 feet tall, unearthed in burial mounds across the Midwest and Appalachia, often accompanied by advanced artifacts, copper tools, woven fabrics, ceremonial objects. These accounts were documented by local historians, excavators, even Smithsonian affiliates. And then, almost without explanation, many of the remains vanished from public view. Museums did not display them. Collections lost catalogs. Skepticism replaced curiosity. But the stories endured, passed down through generations, as if the earth itself refused to let them go. Even more unsettling are the elongated skulls of Paracas, Peru, some nearly 30% larger in cranial capacity than typical human skulls. While many elongated skulls worldwide result from head binding, Paracas examples include structural differences impossible to achieve through cultural deformation alone. Their bone thickness, suture patterns, and cranial volumes suggest something more than a cosmetic tradition. DNA testing in the early 2010s revealed anomalies, mutations inconsistent with the surrounding population. The conclusions were tentative, contested, politically charged. But the unease remained. What if these skulls belonged not to a ritual elite, but to a lineage now extinct? The discovery of the Denisovans in 2010 further complicated the picture. A single finger bone found in a Siberian cave revealed a species as distinct from Neanderthals as Neanderthals are from us. Yet Denisovans interbred with both, leaving genetic traces in modern populations across Asia and Oceania. Their capabilities are still a mystery. Some genes linked to high-altitude adaptation, immune strength, and physical robustness originate from Denisovans. They may have been giant in stature compared to contemporaries. They may have shaped stone tools with techniques now lost. They may have built, traveled, influenced, remembered. The truth is buried in caves, glaciers, and DNA. The fossil record, once thought to show a clean progression from ape-like ancestors to modern humans, now appears more like a tangled forest, branches crossing, looping, disappearing into shadow. Homo naledi, discovered in South Africa, possessed small brains yet complex cultural behaviors such as ritual burial. Homo floresiensis, the hobbit species from Indonesia, stood barely 3 feet tall, yet showed signs of sophisticated tool use. What then prevents the existence of a larger counterpart, a species taller, stronger, perhaps adapted to a world before catastrophe reshaped the Earth? Myth remembers them. Nearly every culture on Earth preserves stories of giants, not as monsters but as ancient peoples existing before the current age. The Sumerians wrote of the Nephilim, beings of immense size and knowledge, born of gods and mortals. The Greeks spoke of Titans, the builders before the Olympians. Norse sagas depict the Jotnar, primordial beings whose bones shaped the world. Native American tribes tell of the Siteka, red-haired giants who ruled the land before being driven into caves. African, Polynesian, Middle Eastern, Celtic, and Asian traditions all echo similar tales. Myths may distort details, but cultural memory rarely invents the same archetype across continents without a seed of truth. Bones found in Lovelock Cave, California, during the early 20th century pushed this question further. Miners unearthed mummified remains unusually tall, alongside sandals and tools sized for bodies far larger than average human proportions. Photographs exist, reports were published, artifacts collected, yet many remains disappeared or were reclassified. local Paiute legends aligned perfectly with the finds, describing battles with giant beings inhabiting the very cave where the discoveries occurred. Coincidence becomes fragile when oral tradition and physical evidence mirror each other so precisely. At some point, the pattern transcends anecdote. The Earth has produced enough anomalous skeletons, oversized femurs, massive jawbones, cranial vaults inconsistent with Homo sapiens, that they cannot all be dismissed as misidentification. Something else is happening. Something older than our history books. And when science encounters contradictions, it cannot fit into existing frameworks. The contradictions are often silenced rather than studied. But bones are not the only clues. Architecture itself behaves like testimony. The megalithic structures of the ancient world, Baalbek's platform, the terraces of Saksai Waman, the cyclopean walls of Ollantaytambo, seem built for beings of immense physical strength. Doorways are enormous, steps spaced unusually far apart, stone blocks shaped and moved in ways modern engineers still debate. Were these structures built by humans our size for ceremonial grandeur? Or were they constructed by or for beings physically suited to them? Even genetic anomalies in modern populations raise unsettling questions. Certain groups in the Pacific and parts of Asia carry Denisovan genes associated with robust skeletal features. Others possess haplogroups linked to unknown ancient hominins. It is possible, even probable, that multiple human species coexisted, interbred, and contributed to the gene pool we now call Homo sapiens. If smaller-bodied hominins like the Flores hobbits could survive into recent millennia, why not larger-bodied ones? Evolution is not linear. It is adaptive. In environments with abundant megafauna, robust build and large stature could be advantageous. In pre-cataclysmic epochs, when atmospheric density and environmental conditions differed, larger hominin species might have thrived. The Younger Dryas impact and subsequent climate upheaval may have wiped out not just animals, but entire human branches. The bones that survive are not the full story. They are fragments preserved by chance. Some researchers propose that giants could have been remnants of civilizations predating 12,000 years ago, survivors of an advanced culture destroyed by cataclysm. If such a world existed, its inhabitants may have been physically different from us, adapted to conditions that no longer exist. Their bones would challenge modern assumptions. Their artifacts would unsettle our timelines. Their memory would be encoded not in our textbooks, but in myths of gods, heroes, and sky beings. Such speculation may seem fantastical, yet the accumulation of anomalies, myths, and genetic evidence demands a deeper investigation. The reason giants feel impossible is not because the evidence is lacking, but because the narrative of human supremacy depends on believing we are the pinnacle of evolution. Anything suggesting an older, stronger, wiser humanity threatens that identity. And history, like all systems of power, defends its identity fiercely. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, institutions often dismissed or absorbed anomalous discoveries without public explanation. Skeptics claim incompetence, mislabeling, or exaggeration. Believers claim suppression. The truth may lie somewhere between bureaucratic negligence and institutional discomfort with rewriting timelines, but the effect is the same. Evidence disappears, narratives remain unchallenged, and humanity's past becomes a curated story rather than an honest one. The bones that reach public attention are often those that align neatly with expected evolution. Those that do not conform, giant skeletons, hybrid skulls, anomalous tools, are either sidelined or lost. Yet legends persist. They persist because they echo something older than organized religion, older than empire, older than writing. They echo memory. Imagine a world before ours, a world with multiple human species coexisting, some small, some tall, some physically powerful, some intellectually brilliant. Imagine cataclysms wiping out entire branches, leaving only a few survivors who wandered into the next age as living myths. Imagine those survivors interacting with early Homo sapiens, teaching them, frightening them, ruling them, inspiring stories of gods walking among men. This idea is not only mythic, it is logical. Modern humans have existed for over 300,000 years. Civilization, in the archaeological sense, only for about 6,000. What were we doing for the other 294,000? With multiple species coexisting, with climates shifting, with landscapes rising and falling, it is inevitable that complex societies rose and fell long before the current cycle. The bones of giants, the skulls of hybrids, the myths of ancient beings. These are the threads left from those lost epochs. Even modern hunters and explorers occasionally report encountering oversized footprints, unusual skeletal fragments, or bones misaligned with human anatomy. Most stories fade. A few linger. They become whispers carried by mountains and forests. But the world does not forget its inhabitants, even when we do. In South America, legends speak of Viracocha, a tall, bearded god who emerged after a great flood to restore knowledge. In Polynesia, ancestral stories describe large, powerful beings called the Tangata Manu. In Africa, myths recall ancient giants who shaped landscapes. Each culture remembers beings larger than modern humans, not as monsters, but as progenitors or teachers. These patterns transcend coincidence. They form a near global memory of a time when different types of humans walked the earth together. Science, slowly and reluctantly, is beginning to accept that humanity's past is far more complicated than once believed. New genetic studies reveal ghost populations, hominins who contributed to our DNA but left no identifiable fossils. These unknown ancestors challenge the idea of a single linear heritage. They suggest a world where interbreeding was common, where migrations overlapped, where human diversity was richer than anything seen today. What we call Homo sapiens may not be a pure species, but a mosaic, a composite of multiple ancient lineages. Some lineages were small and agile, others were strong and massive. Some adapted to cold, others to heat, altitude, or dense forests. The disappearance of giant hominins may have been a result of environmental collapse, competition, or assimilation. Their myths remain because myths are how memory survives extinction. When ancient people encountered the ruins of structures too large for their size, they attributed them to giants. When they inherited tools or symbols they did not understand, they attributed them to gods. When they lived alongside humans physically different from themselves, they wove stories to explain those differences. Over time, those stories became the legends we now dismiss. But legends do not arise in a vacuum. They are the shadows cast by forgotten realities. If a giant skeleton unearthed in the 19th century vanished from a museum collection, it does not erase the fact that someone saw it. If DNA from a 40,000-year-old jawbone reveals interbreeding with a mysterious hominin, it does not matter that we lack a complete skeleton. If myths across continents speak of beings who built, fought, taught, and vanished, it does not matter that their bones lie undiscovered. History is not built only from what we find. It is shaped by what we refuse to look for. The earth remembers everything. It remembers the weight of footsteps long erased by wind. It remembers the pressure of bodies buried beneath mountains of soil. It remembers species whose names we will never learn. And sometimes, when the ground shifts just right, when erosion carves away the layers, when miners dig too deep or archaeologists brush away the dust, the earth reveals something it has held for thousands of years, something that doesn't belong to our version of history, something that challenges our identity. A femur too large, a skull too long, a jaw too massive, a species too different. Each anomaly is a key to a door we have not yet opened, a door to a world older, stranger, and more diverse than the one we imagine, a world where humanity was not one species but many, a world where giants may not have been myth but memory. If we follow these clues, not dismissing them, not fearing them, we may find that our story is far taller, far older, far richer than we were taught. We may discover that the beings remembered as gods and giants were not supernatural at all, but simply human. Human in forms we no longer see, human in ways we no longer are, human in chapters of our history buried beneath the bones of time. And if that is true, then the greatest question is not whether giants existed. It is whether we are ready to accept a past in which we were not alone, not singular, not the pinnacle, but simply the latest branch of a vast and ancient tree. A tree whose roots run deep beneath the soil, whose branches stretch into myth, and whose fallen leaves still whisper the stories of those who came before us. History is supposed to move in one direction, from simple to complex, primitive to sophisticated. That is the story we are taught. But objects do not obey stories. They do not care about timelines or assumptions. Artifacts appear where they appear, shaped by hands we cannot identify, forged with techniques we cannot replicate, buried in layers that make no sense. Archaeologists call them ooparts, out-of-place artifacts, a term that sounds almost playful, as if labeling the anomaly makes it less threatening. But the truth behind these discoveries is not playful. It is unsettling, because each forbidden artifact is a fracture in the narrative, a whisper from a world that should not exist. It begins with metal, the oldest mystery of all. The Bronze Age, we are told, began around 3300 BCE in Mesopotamia. Iron followed much later. Steel came centuries after that. And yet scattered across the earth are artifacts whose metallurgy defies every known timeline. They appear in strata far older than the civilizations capable of making them, forged with techniques beyond the reach of the cultures where they are found. The artifacts themselves are small, tools, nails, spheres, rings, carvings, but their implications are immense. In 1885, workers in the Austrian village of Vöcklabruck discovered a small iron cube embedded in a lump of coal. The coal seam was roughly 60 million years old. Geologists examined the cube, noting its precise angles and unnatural symmetry. It was clearly manufactured. But manufactured by whom? When? Humanity, as we know it, did not exist 60 million years ago. The standard explanation is contamination. But no documentation exists of any industrial process in that region capable of producing such an object. And the workers who found it had no reason to fake anything. The Vöcklabruck cube remains an anomaly, quietly tucked away in a museum drawer. Another artifact surfaced in 1974 in a Romanian copper mine. A wedge-shaped aluminum object encased in sand dated to as early as 11,000 years ago, thousands of years before aluminum smelting was invented. Further tests revealed that the alloy composition of the object matched no known industrial source. While some claimed it was part of a modern machine accidentally mixed into the strata, metallurgical analysis contradicted those claims. If genuine, the artifact suggests that an unknown group possessed advanced metalworking skills long before recorded history. Even stranger are the Klerksdorp spheres, small, perfectly rounded stone and metal objects discovered in South African mines. Some contain grooves spiraling around their circumference with mathematical precision, as if lathed. They are found in rock formations more than 2 billion years old. Skeptics argue natural geological processes created them. Yet metallurgists examining the spheres note structural anomalies inconsistent with natural formation. Whether artificial or not, the spheres force us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. Either nature is more precise than we understand, or intelligent hands shaped these objects in a world no timeline accounts for. Then there are the anomalies of Colombia, the so-called aerodynamic gold artifacts discovered in ancient tombs. At first glance, they appear decorative, stylized animal forms. But when aerodynamic engineers studied them, they found features matching modern aircraft design: stabilizing tail fins, delta wings, swept profiles. One even exhibits structures resembling landing gear. A team of German researchers built scaled models of the artifacts and tested them in wind tunnels. They flew with stability. They glided. They performed. These were not toys. They were representations of something the artisans had seen, something capable of flight. Did ancient Colombians witness flying machines, or did they inherit memories of a world where such machines existed? Consider the Baghdad battery. Clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods, discovered in Iraq and dated to around 200 BCE. When filled with acidic liquid, they generate small electrical currents. Some argue they were used for electroplating. Others believe they had ritual significance. But their design is unmistakably functional. If these were part of a larger tradition of electrical experimentation, the evidence is gone, erased by time or destroyed in conflict. Similarly baffling is the Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. Often called the world's first analog computer, it contains over 30 bronze gears in a compact system capable of tracking lunar cycles, planetary positions, eclipses, and celestial events with astonishing accuracy. Radiocarbon dating places it around 100 BCE, but the sophistication of the device implies centuries of iterative engineering behind it. Yet no earlier models have been found. It appears suddenly and disappears just as suddenly, like the final surviving relic of a lost technological tradition. Metallurgy provides even more shocks. The Delhi iron pillar, erected more than 1,600 years ago, resists corrosion despite India's harsh climate. Its rust-resistant properties come not from chance, but from advanced metallurgical knowledge, precise ratios of phosphorus, slag, and iron, techniques that modern scientists could not replicate with the same purity until the 20th century. If such knowledge existed in antiquity, why does it appear in isolation? What tradition did it come from? What lineage did it end? In China, artifacts of anomalous metallurgy include bells cast with precision harmonics, some producing perfect resonant frequencies comparable to modern tuning devices. Their internal grain structures reveal casting methods far beyond the capabilities attributed to their era. These bells were not simply musical instruments. They were acoustic technologies, engineered through trial and error, or inherited from a tradition already mastered. Stone tools present their own mysteries. In Australia, archaeologists discovered stone axes dated to 46,000 years ago, with edges sharper than surgical steel. These tools required controlled heating and quenching methods that should not exist in Paleolithic contexts. Meanwhile, obsidian blades from the Americas show molecular-level smoothness that modern glass-cutting technology struggles to achieve. These techniques appear out of nowhere, without precursor, without development, as if an unknown group possessed advanced craftsmanship and vanished before leaving clear cultural footprints. At times, the artifacts are not objects but structures, places built with such precision they defy explanation even with modern machinery. The ancient Inca site of Sacsayhuaman includes walls with blocks fitted so tightly that a razor blade cannot slip between them. But the real mystery lies in the stone itself. Some blocks display signs of vitrification, as if exposed to extreme heat melting the stone surface. This phenomenon is found worldwide, in Scotland's vitrified forts, at Machu Picchu, in certain Andean temples. Natural fires cannot reach the temperatures required. What could? Ancient lasers? Energy weapons? Or some unknown heat-based technique lost to time? Meanwhile, at Tiwanaku's Puma Punku, the H-shaped blocks contain machine-like grooves, drill holes, and perfectly parallel lines, signs of precision tooling. Engineers note that replicating these with copper chisels would require superhuman patience and effort, yet the placement suggests mass production. Some blocks appear cut with tools capable of vibrating at high frequencies, similar to ultrasonic cutting technology. Where did this knowledge come from? Why does it appear isolated, without earlier or later examples? Even stranger are the artifacts found where they should not be. In Illinois, the discovery of a Roman-style terracotta tablet buried in a mound once seemed impossible, dismissed as a hoax. In South America, objects resembling Phoenician script appear centuries before any known contact. In Egypt, a hieroglyph depicts what looks like a helicopter, submarine, and aircraft, debated endlessly but undeniably intriguing. The Dogon tribe of Mali had knowledge of the Sirius star system, including an invisible companion star, long before telescopes. They said they were taught by beings who came from the sky. When these patterns accumulate, the world begins to look different. Not chaotic, not random, patterned, connected, as if humanity, long before recorded history, possessed fragments of knowledge far more advanced than we admit, as if survivors of lost civilizations carried these fragments across continents, as if myths of gods teaching metallurgy, flight, astronomy, and architecture were not metaphors but memories. Consider the legend of the Golden Age in Greek mythology, an era before the flood, when humanity lived in harmony with the gods, or the Hindu concept of cyclical yugas, where civilizations rise and fall over tens of thousands of years, or the Egyptian story of Zep Tepi, the first time when divine beings ruled the earth. These myths describe technology indirectly through metaphor: flying chariots, thunder weapons, celestial tools. Could these be symbolic descriptions of advanced technologies? Could flying chariots be aircraft? Thunder weapons, energy tools? Divine tools, devices? Skeptics argue imagination and exaggeration. But when imagination aligns with artifacts, when technological symbolism in myth mirrors the form of artifacts in tombs, temples, and caves, coincidence becomes fragile. The aerodynamic gold models of Colombia resemble jets. The Vimana texts of India describe craft powered by unknown energies. Norse sagas speak of hammers returning through the air. Mayan glyphs resemble rockets. If these are all metaphors, they are extraordinarily consistent ones. Some forbidden artifacts challenge time itself. In 1961, a hammer encased in rock was found in Texas. The surrounding rock dated to more than 100 million years old. Critics argue that the rock may have formed around the hammer secondarily, but the mystery remains. In Russia, microgears resembling modern components were discovered in ancient strata, sparking debate about contamination versus genuine anomaly. In China, objects resembling machine parts were found embedded in a 300-million-year-old seam. Most of these discoveries are brushed aside because they contradict the timeline. But contradictions do not erase themselves. They wait. Even textiles present mysteries. In Peru, cloths dyed with techniques rivaling modern chemical precision have been found in tombs thousands of years old. Molecular analysis reveals color fastness requiring sophisticated bonding processes. How did ancient weavers achieve this without access to chemical knowledge, trial and error, or inherited understanding from a previous era? The same question applies to the Nazca lines, gigantic geoglyphs visible only from the air. Why create something that cannot be appreciated from the ground? Why carve animal shapes across miles of desert with perfect proportions? The official explanation is ritual significance, but rituals do not require runway-like straight lines stretching for miles. Something deeper is at play. A memory of flight, a desire to communicate with something in the sky, or instructions meant for future generations. Even deeper underground lie the megalithic caves and tunnels carved with laser-like precision. The Hypogeum of Malta contains room after room of subterranean architecture carved from solid limestone with surfaces so smooth they resemble modern machining. The Derinkuyu complex in Turkey spans 18 levels underground, ventilated by a shaft engineered with astonishing sophistication. No soot marks appear anywhere, suggesting that the builders used a light source other than torches. These are not primitive shelters. They are engineered spaces, built with techniques out of sync with their age. What emerges from all these anomalies is a single, unavoidable theme. The past was not simple. Humanity did not stumble naively from stone tools into civilization. Something older preceded us, something sophisticated, connected, and capable. Its fingerprints lie scattered across continents, in artifacts that should not exist, technologies that appear from nowhere, myths that contain technical memory, ruins cut with impossible precision. These fingerprints suggest a civilization, or multiple civilizations, predating the Younger Dryas cataclysm. When the world collapsed, survivors preserved what they could. Some knowledge survived in stone, some in myth, some in artifacts now labeled anomalies. Others vanished forever beneath ice and ocean. But enough remains to show that the human story is not a linear climb, but a cycle of rise, collapse, rediscovery, and the forbidden artifacts The cubes, spheres, bells, tools, anomalous metals, prehistoric batteries, aerodynamic models, and impossible stonework are the scattered remnants of those earlier cycles, pieces of a puzzle buried in strata and legend alike. If we look honestly at these objects, without forcing them into accepted timelines, without dismissing them as errors, we may begin to see the outline of a world much older and far stranger than we imagine. A world where technology and spirituality blended seamlessly. A world where metallurgy, astronomy, acoustics, and architecture were part of a unified knowledge system. A world erased by catastrophe, but not completely forgotten. A world whose echoes survive in the artifacts that do not belong. And if those echoes continue to surface, perhaps it is because the earth wants us to remember, or because the past is rising again, pressing upward through soil and sediment, reminding us that we are not the first to build, nor the first to fall, nor the first to wield knowledge we barely understand. We think we are modern, but the artifacts say otherwise. They say we are children playing with fragments of a forgotten age. They say our ancestors were not primitive. They were survivors rebuilding in the dim light after the collapse of a world we do not remember. They say the past is not gone. It is waiting. Buried. And one day it will rewrite us. If artifacts reveal forgotten technologies, then the Earth itself reveals something even stranger. A hidden system of power older than civilization, woven into the landscape like an invisible architecture. Ancient cultures did not build randomly. They built with intention. They aligned their temples, pyramids, megaliths, and stone circles with such global precision that the coordination seems impossible unless something deeper, older, and more unified existed long before the cultures we know. These alignments do not stop at astronomy. They follow the contours of invisible pathways, lines that stretch across continents, connecting sacred sites separated by oceans, mountains, and millennia. We call them ley lines, a modern word for something ancient people understood instinctively. The Earth is alive, and its energy flows along predictable paths. To modern science, this idea is mystical at best, pseudoscience at worst. But ancient builders behaved as if they could feel these currents beneath their feet. They placed their monuments where the Earth's natural resonance seemed strongest: hilltops, underground fault intersections, magnetic anomalies, and acoustic hotspots. And when they built, they did so using materials that enhanced or amplified these subtle forces. Granite rich in quartz, basalt with high magnetic potential, limestone capable of transmitting vibration. These materials are not random choices. They are intentional components, parts of a system we no longer understand. Look at the global map of megalithic structures. The Great Pyramid of Giza aligns not only with the cardinal directions, but with a global grid, one that includes Easter Island, Nazca, Machu Picchu, Stonehenge, Angkor Wat, and countless other ancient sites. These locations fall along geometric lines that encircle the planet. The probability of random placement is effectively zero. It is as though ancient cultures inherited a blueprint, a map of the Earth's energetic skeleton, and used it to anchor their most sacred structures. The Great Pyramid itself behaves like a capacitor, built with alternating layers of conductive granite and insulating limestone. Its internal chambers and shafts create resonant frequencies that vibrate at measurable intensities. Some frequencies match the Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of the Earth. The pyramid is not a tomb. It is a machine, a resonant device interacting with the planet's energy field. If that idea seems too extraordinary, consider that modern physics has proven the Earth generates standing waves, electromagnetic currents, and harmonic fields. Our ancestors may not have had our instruments, but they had sensitivity, a way of sensing the Earth's pulse through sound, vibration, and intuition. To them, building was not an act of domination, but collaboration. They shaped structures to resonate with the Earth, not resist it. And in doing so, they created architecture that interacted with invisible forces. Stonehenge, for example, amplifies certain frequencies. When sound is produced within the circle, the stones reflect and channel it, creating a kind of acoustic chamber. Researchers found that the ancient builders likely understood these properties because specific stones were chosen for their resonance. Why build a musical stone circle? Why encode sound into architecture unless sound served a deeper purpose: healing, communication, ritual, or even energy manipulation? Across the world in the Americas, the Nazca lines form patterns visible only from above. Their geometric precision suggests surveying methods far more advanced than what the culture is credited with. Many lines align toward nearby mountains, ancient springs, or astronomical events. Some researchers believe the lines were part of a larger system connecting ceremonial centers, water sources, and geomagnetic hotspots. The entire desert may have been a living map of invisible Earth energies. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat aligns with celestial cycles, but it also sits on a vast grid of canals, reservoirs, and geometric structures. The water system behaves like a giant capacitor, stabilizing the region's energy field. This was not simply urban planning. It was energetic engineering, the blending of earth, water, and geometry to create harmony between civilization and environment. The same concept appears in the Americas. The Inca built Cusco in the shape of a puma, its streets radiating like arteries from a cosmic center. Sacred sites connected by Siki lines formed a network that structured both geography and society. These lines were symbolic, ritualistic, and astronomical, but they also mirrored the Earth's energetic flow. Every temple, cave, spring, and mountain served a purpose within the network. Chinese geomancy, or feng shui, preserves fragments of the same knowledge. It teaches that qi, the Earth's vital energy, flows along invisible paths. Buildings must be aligned with these flows to ensure harmony. Mountains anchor energy, rivers guide it, structures redirect it. This tradition did not emerge suddenly. It is the surviving remnant of an older global understanding, one that vanished elsewhere but endured in China. When cultures separated by oceans share the same ideas about Earth energy, alignment, vibration, and resonance, something profound is at play. It suggests either shared origin or shared inheritance, knowledge passed down from a time before cultural divergence. Many ancient legends describe a golden age when humanity lived in harmony with natural forces. In Greek myth, the Golden Age preceded the flood. In India, the Satya Yuga was a time of pure knowledge. In Egypt, Zep Tepi marked the era when the gods walked the earth. These stories speak of understanding the world in ways we no longer do, hearing its vibrations, aligning with its cycles, following its energetic currents. Is it possible that ancient civilizations possessed a science we have forgotten? a science that blended astronomy, acoustics, metallurgy, geometry, and earth energy into one unified system? A science erased by catastrophe, preserved only in stone and myth? Evidence suggests exactly that. Consider the shape of the Great Pyramid. Modern physicists discovered that its geometry focuses electromagnetic energy into its chambers. This effect is measurable in laboratory simulations. The pyramid amplifies certain wavelengths, creating concentrated fields. Did the ancient builders know this? If so, they understood electromagnetic resonance thousands of years before it became a concept in physics. Consider also the layout of ancient cities. Many are based on sacred geometry: squares, circles, octagons, spirals, proportions linked to harmonics, waveforms, and natural cycles. Sacred geometry is not artistic decoration. It is a language of energy, a universal blueprint. Temples in Egypt, China, Cambodia, and Central America show identical geometric proportions. Not cultural borrowing, but shared resonance. They align with celestial events, yes, but also with terrestrial nodes, magnetic anomalies, and underground water flows. The idea of resonance becomes even more striking when examining the materials chosen for ancient structures. Granite, basalt, quartzite. These stones respond to vibration. They store and transmit frequencies. When struck, they ring like bells. Some produce electrical charges under pressure. These properties are not accidental. The builders selected stones with specific energetic and acoustic qualities. In the Great Pyramid, granite beams above the king's chamber vibrate at precise frequencies when stimulated. Some researchers believe chanting, drumming, or resonance from earth tremors could activate the structure. Others propose that underground water channels amplified energy passing through the pyramid. If true, the pyramid may have functioned as a generator, not for light bulbs, but for consciousness-altering energy, healing fields, or earth stabilization. Such possibilities challenge modern assumptions. We think of technology as mechanical, industrial, electronic. But what if ancient technology was organic, harmonic, rooted in natural forces rather than manufactured ones? What if their machines were temples, their wires were ley lines, their power source the planet itself? Many ancient ruins show signs of energy manipulation. Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest temple complex, is built atop a geological fault line. Earthquakes release electromagnetic pulses. The temple's circular design, stone pillars, and quartz-rich materials may have amplified these pulses. Some chambers align with underground water flows, another source of energy. Did the builders sense these natural forces? Did they use them in rituals? Or were they preserving ancient knowledge from a forgotten world that understood such interactions deeply? At Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, the ancestral Puebloans built massive structures aligned with solstices, lunar standstills, and terrestrial features. Roads extend for miles, perfectly straight, seemingly leading nowhere. Some researchers believe they mark energetic pathways rather than transportation routes. The structures themselves create harmonic resonance when wind passes through their doorways. Even in the British Isles, many stone circles sit atop magnetic anomalies. Some stones contain high percentages of iron. Others vibrate when struck. These circles may have been designed to interact with Earth's geomagnetic field. What emerges is a picture of ancient engineering that is not purely physical. It is metaphysical, a union of science and spirituality, technology and intuition, geometry, and consciousness. This knowledge may have originated in a civilization before the Younger Dryas cataclysm, a world that harnessed the Earth's natural energies instead of fossil fuels or electricity, a world where temples were power stations, not for machines, but for minds, a world where resonance shaped daily life. If such a civilization existed, its fall would have left fragments, myths of a lost golden age, anomalously advanced structures, energetic alignments, unexplained artifacts. The survivors would have preserved what they could, but the knowledge would have degraded over time, becoming ritual, superstition, and legend. Some cultures preserved more than others. China kept geomancy. India kept Vedic sound science. Egypt kept sacred geometry. The Maya kept astronomical cycles. The Druids kept resonance through stone circles. Each carried a piece of the puzzle. But the whole system, the unified knowledge, vanished. Modern people sense these energies faintly. Some feel certain places vibrate differently. Mountains, waterfalls, deserts, ruins. Some feel drawn to ancient sites without understanding why. The world still hums with the memory of what it once was, and humans, though dulled by modern noise, still feel echoes of that resonance. Ancient knowledge was not lost by accident. Catastrophe destroyed the world that understood it. Flood, fire, impact, climate collapse. Whatever struck the Earth at the end of the Ice Age shattered not just civilizations but sciences. Survivors fled inland, up mountains, into caves. They rebuilt slowly, carrying fragments of memory. Over generations, knowledge became myth. Myth became ritual. Ritual became superstition, and superstition became dismissed. Yet the stones remain. The alignments remain. The anomalies remain. They wait for us to notice them again. When the ancients built along ley lines, they were not worshiping the earth. They were partnering with it. They were tuning their structures like instruments. They were creating standing waves of intention. They were harmonizing human consciousness with planetary rhythms. That idea sounds mystical, only because we have forgotten how to listen. Scientists measure the Schumann resonance at 7.83 Hertz, the frequency at which human brainwaves synchronize during meditation, dream states, and heightened intuition. Ancient chambers resonate near these frequencies. Coincidence or design? Modern research in neuroacoustics shows that low-frequency vibration affects cognition, emotion, and perception. Ancient builders may not have had EEG machines, but they had experience, generations of tuning structures through trial and error until they resonated at frequencies that altered consciousness. They built not for physical survival, but for spiritual evolution. The question is not whether ancient builders possessed advanced knowledge. The question is where they learned it. Did they discover it independently? Did it survive from a pre-cataclysmic world? Or was it taught by beings remembered in myth as gods? Every culture speaks of teachers from the sky, the sea, or the stars. These beings brought architecture, astronomy, writing, and spiritual knowledge. Whether literal or symbolic, these myths point to an external source of advanced understanding. The ancients did not see a divide between science and spirituality. To them, energy was sacred, geometry divine, resonance holy. Today, we see only ruins, but the ruins still function. Pyramids still resonate. Stone circles still hum. Underground chambers still amplify sound. These structures are not dead. They are dormant, waiting, Perhaps what we call spiritual power was once literal, a field generated by structures aligned with earth energy, harmonized by geometry, activated by sound. Perhaps consciousness itself was once shaped by environments tuned to enhance perception. Perhaps ancient humans lived in a world where spiritual experience was not rare, but engineered. If so, then rediscovering this knowledge could change everything: how we build, how we heal, how we understand ourselves. It would mean we are not the first advanced civilization on Earth. It would mean the ancients were not primitive but guardians of a lost science. And it would mean the Earth still remembers the system, the grid, the resonance, the pulse, even if we do not. The stones remember, the lines remember, the Earth remembers. And as more people rediscover the patterns, the past rises again, piece by piece, calling us back to a knowledge that was never truly lost, only forgotten. And somewhere beneath the noise of modern life, if you listen closely, the world still hums with the echoes of that ancient resonance. Long before history began, long before kings carved their names into stone or scribes pressed symbols into clay, the world ended. Not once, but many times. Civilizations rose, flourished, reached heights we struggle to imagine. And then everything collapsed in a moment of violence written not in ancient stories, but in the scars of the earth. Myths speak of fire from the sky, mountains that vomit ash, oceans rising without warning, a sun blotted out by darkness, winters that lasted generations. Geology confirms what myth remembers. The planet carries trauma in its crust, impact debris, melt glass, black mats, extinction layers, charred horizons. These are not legends. These are the fingerprints of cataclysms so powerful they nearly erased humanity itself. When archaeologists dig into the younger layers of Earth, they find pottery, bone tools, and remnants of early farming. But when they go deeper into the strata marking the end of the Pleistocene, they find something else: soot. Carbon-rich layers spanning continents, burned forests, instant vitrification of soil, shocked quartz formed only under immense pressure, microscopic spherules forged in temperatures hotter than volcanoes. This is the geological signature of celestial impact, a cosmic event violent enough to ignite whole regions of the planet. Scientists call this the Younger Dryas boundary layer. Ancient people called it the end of the world. Around 12,900 years ago, Earth entered a sudden, brutal winter. Temperatures dropped overnight. Mammoths died where they stood. Forests turned to ash. Sea levels stalled, then surged. Something catastrophic had struck the planet. Something powerful enough to shatter ice sheets 2 miles thick. The most likely explanation is a comet or swarm of fragments from a disintegrating cosmic body. This impact triggered wildfires, atmospheric dust clouds, and global cooling. It also unleashed torrents of meltwater that carved canyons, reshaped coastlines, and drowned countless human settlements. But the Younger Dryas was not the first reset, nor the last. Ancient cultures across the world remember cycles of destruction: fire ages, ice ages, great floods, battles between gods that shook the heavens. These stories are not mere allegory. They are memory, distorted by time, but memory nonetheless. The Hopi speak of previous worlds destroyed by fire and water. The Maya describe suns born and destroyed. Hindu cosmology lays out yugas, cycles of creation and destruction spanning tens of thousands of years. Greek myth recounts golden, silver, bronze, and heroic ages, each ending catastrophically. Norse sagas predict Ragnarok, not a metaphor for moral decline, but a literal destruction of the world by fire, ice, and flood. Even the Bible's simple phrase, "The fountains of the great deep broke open," could be read as a cultural fragment of real geological trauma. These patterns reveal something chilling. Ancient humans were not simply storytellers, they were survivors. They carried the memory of a world that fell apart. What we consider civilization is only the most recent chapter in a far older saga. Humanity did not climb steadily from caves to cities. Humanity endured cycles of growth and annihilation, surviving each time with scars etched into cultural memory. If we examine the ruins and myths with honesty, without forcing them into narrow timelines, a picture emerges of a world that experienced recurring planetary resets, not slow declines, sudden resets. Resets triggered by cosmic events, volcanic eruptions, geomagnetic shifts, or unknown forces lost to time. One of the most haunting clues lies in melt glass found across deserts from Syria to Egypt. This greenish, glassy material forms at temperatures above 3,000 degrees Celsius, hotter than any natural wildfire. In modern times, such glass appears only at nuclear test sites. Yet ancient melt glass predates modern industry by thousands of years. What could generate such heat? Volcanic lightning? A cosmic impact? An ancient technology lost to time? Even more mysterious are the so-called black mats, thin layers of charred organic matter found across North America, Europe, and parts of the Middle East. These layers contain soot, burned bone, nanodiamonds, and impact-related spherules. They appear suddenly, then vanish, marking a moment when ecosystems collapsed. These mats are the smoking gun of a global firestorm, something so vast it incinerated landscapes on multiple continents. For early humans, this was not an abstract geological event. It was terror. It was survival. It was the night the sky fell. Imagine being alive when a fragmenting comet explodes in the atmosphere. A blast brighter than the sun, shockwaves flattening forests, ice sheets cracking like thunder, wildfires igniting across continents, animals fleeing, rivers boiling, ash turning day into night, humans clinging to life in caves, mountains, and forgotten sanctuaries. Imagine passing that story to your children, not as geology but as myth. The gods punished the world, the sky burned, the oceans rose, the sun died. We remember trauma through symbol. And once you understand that, myths transform from fantasy to encoded history. But cataclysms are not always cosmic. Earth itself can turn violent. Volcanic eruptions in the ancient past dwarf anything in recorded history. The Toba supereruption 74,000 years ago nearly wiped out humanity. Genetic evidence suggests the population crashed to as few as a few thousand individuals. Those survivors would have carried the memory of the eruption into the next age. The eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE devastated the Minoan civilization and inspired the story of Atlantis. The eruption of Krakatoa in 535 CE plunged the world into a volcanic winter, causing crop failures from China to Europe. The eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815 caused the year without a summer, freezing rivers and causing famine. These are mild compared to ancient supereruptions. Volcanoes leave scars in ice cores, tree rings, and sediment. They also leave scars in myth, dragons, smoke gods, fire from mountains, angry deities hurling ash at humanity. But the most disturbing possibility is the one most rarely discussed, that ancient civilizations may have anticipated these cataclysms. They built monuments aligned not only with stars, but with geological markers. They tracked precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, not for agricultural reasons, but because precession correlates with cyclical cosmic risk. The ancients seemed obsessed with the sky, not for superstition, but for survival. They knew that cosmic impacts tend to occur in cycles when Earth's orbit intersects debris from ancient comets. They tracked these cycles through star positions, lunar alignments, and long-count calendars. When the cycles peaked, they built underground. They migrated. They buried temples. They carved warnings in stone. Göbekli Tepe, perhaps the oldest temple complex in the world, appears to encode astronomical information linked to catastrophic events. Carvings of animals, symbols, and celestial patterns may record the positions of the sky during past impacts. One pillar, the vulture stone, seems to depict a cosmic event exactly at the time the Younger Dryas began. Why bury the entire complex under tons of soil? Was it ritual, or was it preservation? A time capsule for the next age. Even the Great Pyramid may encode catastrophic cycles. Its internal geometry, passage alignments, and proportions correspond with astronomical patterns and mathematical constants. If the builders were preserving knowledge for future generations, what better way than a structure that can survive nearly anything? Civilizations fall. Stone endures. Throughout the world, ancient texts describe teachers, gods, or sages who appeared after a great disaster to restore knowledge. They did not come during peace. They came during aftermath, after fire, after ice, after flood. They brought astronomy, agriculture, law, writing, the building blocks of civilization. These stories appear not only in Sumer, Egypt, and India, but in the Andes, the Pacific, and indigenous North America. Always the same pattern. Catastrophe, then rebirth guided by figures who remember the lost world. Were these figures literal, survivors of an advanced civilization, or symbolic, personifications of knowledge preserved in sanctuaries? Myth is ambiguous because memory is fragile, but the consistency of the pattern cannot be ignored. Something survived the last great cataclysm, some knowledge, some wisdom, some fragment of a world erased. And the anomalies in architecture, metallurgy, astronomy, and myth all suggest that this lost world was not primitive. It was sophisticated. Perhaps not industrial in the modern sense, but advanced in ways we cannot easily classify. A world whose science blended geometry, energy, consciousness, and nature. A world that knew the cycles of destruction and sought to outlast them. The survivors built monuments to warn us. They encoded cycles in star charts. They carved flood myths into tablets. They constructed megaliths in perfect alignment with celestial markers. They buried knowledge in underground chambers. They left behind stories of fire, of ice, of oceans rising, of worlds ending. But over time, the memory faded. Ritual replaced understanding. Myth replaced memory. And we, living in the comfortable illusion of modernity, forgot that the world can change in an instant. Yet the Earth remembers. Ice cores reveal sudden temperature shifts. Sediment layers reveal rapid sea level rise. Crater fields reveal ancient impacts. Volcanic deposits reveal devastation beyond imagination. The past is not a slow march. It is a heartbeat, steady for ages, then violent, then steady again. We live between catastrophes, not outside them. Modern science is beginning to rediscover what ancient cultures preserved in stories. Cosmologists warn of debris fields Earth passes through cyclically. Geologists warn of overdue supervolcanic eruptions. Climate scientists warn of destabilizing feedback loops. Archaeologists uncover ruins suggesting older civilizations existed before known history. Everything points to the same reality the ancients tried to tell us. The world resets repeatedly. Some resets are cosmic, some are volcanic, some are oceanic, some are magnetic, some are a combination of all the above. What matters is not the mechanism, but the memory. Humanity is not the first advanced civilization. It will not be the last. Ancient builders left warnings in stone because stone survives. They left myths because stories survive. They left astronomical alignments because the sky is eternal. And they left encoded cycles because the cycles themselves never stop. We are living in a chapter, not the book. One age of many. One rise built on the ruins of countless others. And somewhere beneath the surface of our collective memory lies the echo of warnings from those who lived before the last fall. Perhaps they hoped that someday, far in the future, a generation would finally understand the message they carved across continents. The world you know is fragile. The peace you trust is temporary. The cycle always returns. And when it does, what will survive? Stone, myth, and whatever fragments of wisdom we choose to preserve, just as our ancestors once did, just as future civilizations will do after us. Because the earth turns, the sky shifts, and the cycle waits. Patient, eternal, indifferent. And somewhere deep beneath the crust, beneath the ash and melt glass and buried temples, the past still breathes, waiting for the next collapse, the next rebirth, the next chance for humanity to open its eyes. Long before the histories we memorize in school, before kingdoms carved borders and empires declared dominion, there were migrations so vast, so ancient, and so forgotten that they now survive only as whispers carried by the ocean. The world we know, continents fixed on maps, borders etched in ink, is nothing like the world our distant ancestors inhabited. Sea levels rose more than 400 feet since the end of the last ice age, swallowing entire landscapes, forests, cities, and homelands. What remains above the waterline is only the last thin layer of a world that once spread far beyond our coastlines. If civilizations existed before the great floods, their cities would now lie deep beneath the waves, erased not by time, but by oceans too vast for archaeology to penetrate. And yet, despite that erasure, fragments survive. Myths, legends, symbols, linguistic traces, monumental ruins perched on high ground, and cultural memories that refuse to die. Every continent tells the same story. Once, there was a land that is no longer there. In the Pacific, Polynesians speak of Hawaii, a homeland far to the east, now lost beneath the ocean. In Southeast Asia, legends describe Sundaland, a sprawling landmass that once connected Indonesia, Malaysia, and Indochina before rising seas drowned it. In India, ancient texts speak of Kumari Kandam, a vast civilization south of Tamil Nadu, swallowed by the Indian Ocean. In Japan, memories linger of Yonaguni's underwater terraces. In the Atlantic, countless cultures speak of Atlantis, not as fantasy, but as memory. And in the Americas, indigenous traditions preserve accounts of ancestral homelands destroyed by rising waters, forcing migrations into the highlands. These are not isolated stories. They are a global archive of loss, grief, displacement, and remembrance. They describe a world that once existed, a world erased by water. Modern science confirms what these myths have preserved. During the last ice age, ocean levels were far lower. Doggerland connected Britain to Europe. The Bering Shelf connected Siberia to Alaska, not as a narrow land bridge, but as a vast, fertile plain. Sundaland was the size of a subcontinent. The Persian Gulf was a river valley. The Caribbean contained far more exposed land, and dozens of islands in the Pacific formed archipelagos now drowned. Where there is land, there is life. Where there is life, there are cultures. And where cultures thrive, they leave their mark, not always in stone, but in memory. The greatest forgotten migrations likely began as ice melted, floods surged, and ancient coasts vanished. Populations fled higher ground. Survivors carried stories of destruction into the New World. These survivors could have been the ancestors of later civilizations: Sumerians, Egyptians, Indus Valley peoples, early Chinese dynasties, Andean cultures. But their origins may lie not in the places we associate with them today, but in drowned lands now lost beneath the oceans. Consider the similarities between early myths worldwide. Flood stories appear in every culture, more than 600 documented versions across continents. These stories do not describe local floods. They describe global cataclysm. They speak of rising seas, long rains, collapsing skies, and entire worlds submerged. The consistency is astonishing. Ancient people were not exchanging stories across continents. They were preserving trauma. Egyptian priests told Solon that their civilization had been destroyed many times, each time by fire or water. Plato recorded this, describing cataclysms that wiped out advanced societies. The Maya wrote of previous worlds destroyed by flood. Mesopotamian epics recount kings living in distant ages before the Great Deluge. Aboriginal Australians preserve stories 12,000 years old about coastlines eroding as seas rose, stories verified by modern geological reconstructions. These memories span continents and millennia. They are not coincidence. They are the ancestral memory of global migration. The evidence is not only linguistic or mythological, it is architectural. Across the world, ancient structures appear in places that should not support such complexity. High mountains, remote deserts, regions lacking the development time to produce advanced societies. This suggests that the builders came from somewhere else, refugees from drowned coastlines, carrying knowledge with them. Mountaintop ruins like Sacsayhuaman, Machu Picchu, and Tiahuanaco rise above ancient flood levels, suggesting intentional placement after catastrophic deluge. The same pattern appears in the Middle East. Göbekli Tepe sits on high ground above the Haran Plain, as if the builders chose a location safe from floodwaters. The Indus Valley civilization sprawled along rivers reshaped by meltwater from Himalayan glaciers. Early Egyptian settlements appear not on the modern Nile's banks, but further west, in areas shaped by earlier river patterns. It is as if the first cities of the post-cataclysmic world were founded by people who knew the seas could rise again. A deeper question emerges. Who were these migrants? Were they simply early hunter-gatherers reacting to climate change? Or did they belong to an older civilization, one that flourished when sea levels were low, building coastal cities that now lie submerged? If so, their descendants would have carried remnants of a lost knowledge tradition inland, rebuilding civilization from memory. Underwater archaeology offers clues but not answers. Structures off the coasts of Japan, India, Malta, the Bahamas, and Peru suggest human engineering in places now submerged. The site of Yonaguni features terraces, platforms, and geometric shapes that look unmistakably artificial. Off the coast of Gujarat lies Dwarka, an underwater city with walls, streets, and artifacts dating back thousands of years. In the Mediterranean, structures near Malta appear to be megalithic temples swallowed by rising seas. Off Cuba's coast, sonar scans reveal symmetrical structures resembling pyramids or plazas. Skeptics claim natural formations. But the patterns, straight lines, 90-degree angles, stair-like platforms, consistent proportional ratios, point toward intelligent design. If even one of these structures proves human-made from the late Pleistocene or early Holocene, it would rewrite history. Modern civilization would not be the first complex society, it would be the latest. Linguistic anomalies offer more clues. Languages in distant regions share root structures that should not exist if humans migrated solely by land routes. Austronesian languages span nearly half the planet, from Madagascar to Hawaii to Easter Island. Their spread suggests a maritime tradition older and more sophisticated than previously recognized. Polynesians navigated the Pacific using star maps, currents, and wave patterns, techniques so precise they rival modern instruments. But where did that knowledge originate? Did their ancestors inherit it from a world where oceans were highways rather than barriers? DNA studies reveal surprising migrations. Indigenous Australians share genetic markers with ancient Indians. South American tribes contain haplogroups linked to Pacific Islanders. Some Arctic peoples have genetic ties to Southeast Asia. These patterns imply ancient seafaring on a scale far larger than expected. Seafaring that predates known boat-building traditions. Seafaring that suggests a lost maritime culture, possibly based in regions now underwater. If an advanced civilization existed during the Ice Age, its cities would have been coastal, following abundant resources along shorelines. When sea levels rose, those cities drowned. Their inhabitants fled inland, taking with them fragments of a world now lost. Without access to coastal resources, metallurgy, and trade networks, much of their knowledge would have been lost. What survived would have seemed miraculous to local hunter-gatherers. And those miracles, writing, architecture, astronomy, would become the seeds of future civilizations. This is the diffusion model. Not independent invention everywhere, but the scattering of survivors from a drowned world. Each group preserved fragments. Sumerians preserved astronomy. Egyptians preserved geometry. Indus peoples preserved urban planning. Chinese dynasties preserved chronology. Andean cultures preserved stonework. Polynesians preserved navigation. No single culture preserved everything. But together, their fragments form a mosaic of a world erased by water. Even after migration stabilized, the memory of the drowned homeland remained. It became the foundation of mythology. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, Hawaii, Kumarikandam, Pan, Aztlan. These names differ, but their meaning is the same. A civilization lost to the sea. In Plato's account, Atlantis was not fantastical. It was historical, passed down through Egyptian priests as memory. They described it not as an island of gods, but as a powerful kingdom destroyed by one terrible day and night of fire and flood. This description matches geological evidence of impacts triggering rapid flooding. Legends of Mu and Lemuria emerged more recently, but they reflect older myths of vanished Pacific lands and civilizations swallowed by rising seas. Indigenous Pacific Islanders recount stories of islands that once existed but are now beneath the waves. These stories overlap with geological evidence: coral atolls drowned, volcanic islands eroded, sea levels rising over millennia. In India, Tamil epics describe lands extending far south into the Indian Ocean, ruled by advanced dynasties and rich in culture. These lands sank, forcing migrations into the subcontinent. Geological studies confirm that large parts of the continental shelf south of India were dry land during the Ice Age. These legends are not fantasies. They are cultural memories of real geological events, memories passed down for thousands of years through song, symbol, and story. But what if some of these drowned lands contained not just villages, but cities, complex societies with technology, writing, and architecture? What if the stories of gods arriving after the flood refer not to supernatural beings, but to survivors of a lost civilization bringing knowledge to rebuilt societies? This possibility gains weight when examining sudden leaps in human development. The emergence of agriculture around 12,000 years ago happened simultaneously across multiple continents. Writing systems appeared abruptly in Sumer, Egypt, and China. Monumental architecture began at Göbekli Tepe, then spread in waves through the Mediterranean, the Americas, and Asia. These transformations appear too rapid to be independent or spontaneous. They resemble cultural transplantation, knowledge seeded by migrants who already possessed fragments of advanced understanding. Even religious symbols show suspicious continuity. Serpents, suns, celestial birds, world trees, mother goddesses, and flood survivors appear in nearly every ancient tradition. These symbols may not represent local belief systems, but remnants of a shared mythos from a world that no longer exists. If ancient migrations spread such symbols, they also spread architecture. The megaliths of Europe, the pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the pyramids of Mesoamerica, the mounds of North America, and the terraces of the Pacific all share structural principles: alignment, geometry, orientation, and proportional ratios. These principles suggest not coincidence, but inheritance. The people who carried this knowledge across continents likely came from coastal civilizations drowned by the rising seas. They reached highlands, valleys, and inland plains. They taught local peoples. They built monumental structures to recreate their lost world. And as generations passed, their stories became myth. Their cities became ruins. Their memories became legends. But some traces of the old world remain, not just underwater ruins, but cultural fossils embedded in the societies that followed. The Dogon of Mali preserve astronomical knowledge about Sirius B, an invisible star. The Maori recount navigation methods tracing back to a lost homeland. Native American tribes map migration routes stretching from drowned coastlines. Aboriginal Australians hold songs describing landscapes submerged more than 10,000 years ago. These are not coincidences. They are the fingerprints of an ancient world speaking through its descendants. And perhaps the most haunting clue is this: every culture speaks of ancestors traveling by boat after the flood, not by land, by sea. The survivors of the lost world were mariners, navigators, explorers, teachers. Their home was swallowed by water, but their knowledge crossed oceans. They became the seed of the civilizations we call ancient. But their true origins lie beyond our maps, beneath the waves, in the silence of drowned continents. Today, sonar scans, satellite mapping, and underwater archaeology slowly reveal hints of this forgotten world. Geometric structures on continental shelves, terraced plateaus in deep water, possible harbors buried beneath silt, tools and pottery recovered from submerged caves, even DNA markers tracing migrations back to now-vanished coastlines. Piece by piece, the ocean yields its secrets, but the full story remains hidden, not because it is false, but because it is vast. The world we know is the remnant, not the whole. The survivors of the last cycle built our earliest civilizations, but even they remembered that what came before was greater. We are the children of migrants who fled a world destroyed by rising seas. We inherit their stories without understanding their origins. We marvel at their myths without realizing they describe real places. We study their ruins without realizing they are the aftershocks of a lost age. And if history teaches one truth, it is this: the sea always returns. It takes, it buries, it erases, but it also preserves. Deep beneath the waves, the cities of the forgotten world still sleep, waiting for us to rediscover them. And when we finally do, it will not merely rewrite history. It will reveal where we truly came from. In the end, every forbidden question leads to the same destination. Us. Not the monuments, not the skeletons, not the lost continents or vanished cities, but the human being reading the story of the world through fragments left behind. Because when you strip away the ruins, the artifacts, the myths, the migrations, and the cataclysms, what remains is a mystery far more intimate. Who are we? Where did we come from? And why does every culture, every tradition, every surviving shard of ancient memory insist that humanity is older, deeper, stranger, and more cyclical than we allow ourselves to believe? The truth is not buried in stone. It is buried in memory, collective memory, genetic memory, mythic memory. We are the descendants of survivors. Every ancestor you have lived through something: a flood, a famine, a collapse, a war, a migration across oceans, a winter that nearly erased their lineage, a firestorm that consumed their world. They carried knowledge across generations, compressing it into stories simple enough to survive oral transmission. Gods descended from the sky. Giants walked the earth. Civilizations rose and fell. Great floods wiped out nations. Teachers returned after the cataclysm. The stars warned of cycles. These were not metaphors. They were instructions. They were warnings. And they were memories preserved by people who witnessed events of such scale they reshaped the world. But over time, memory dissolves. Languages change, stories soften, rituals replace understanding, and eventually a civilization arises, like ours, convinced it is the first, convinced it discovered everything on its own, convinced it understands its past when it barely remembers yesterday. Yet the evidence of the forgotten world surrounds us. The pyramids align with constellations marking epochs long before recorded history. Megaliths reflect a knowledge of earth energy, resonance, and geometry. Underwater ruins reveal coastlines that once supported advanced cultures. Uparts whisper of metallurgy and technologies out of place. Legends of sky beings echo across continents. DNA reveals migrations no textbook mentions. Geological layers describe cataclysms matching ancient stories. The truth is not singular. The truth is layered, like the earth itself. And if we read those layers honestly, a picture emerges. Humanity did not begin 5,000 years ago. The human story extends far beyond Sumer, beyond Egypt, beyond India, beyond the first river valleys. It stretches into a deep past where civilizations rose before ours, flourished, expanded, and were wiped away by forces beyond their control. We are not the pinnacle. We are the continuation. We are the descendants of those who lived through the last great reset. And perhaps we stand at the edge of another. Modern life has severed us from the past. We have forgotten the language of the earth. We have forgotten that civilizations rise only when they remain in harmony with their environment. We have forgotten that power built on imbalance collapses. We have forgotten that the sky is not empty, that cosmic debris still crosses our orbit. We have forgotten that the magnetic field fluctuates, that volcanoes can darken the sun, that oceans can consume continents. We live as if history is stable, but the ancients knew better. That is why they carved warnings in stone. That is why they embedded cycles in myth. That is why they built structures that outlast empires. They were not primitive, they were preparing. They were encoding everything they could for the next world, our world. And now, scattered across the ruins of their civilizations, we see their message taking shape. It is not a literal prophecy. It is a pattern, a rhythm older than writing, older than metal, older than agriculture. A rhythm of rise and fall, light and darkness, growth and collapse. We can ignore it, but the earth will not. Throughout history, whenever humanity reaches a threshold, technological, environmental, spiritual, something shifts, something returns, something awakens. Sometimes that awakening is external, an impact, a volcano, a sudden freeze, a cosmic event. Other times the awakening is internal, a shift in consciousness, a rediscovery of ancient truths, a renaissance of forgotten knowledge. Today both awakenings converge. We stand in an age where science rediscovers what myth preserved, where archaeology uncovers what legend described, where technology detects what shamans sensed, where the boundaries between ancient and modern begin to dissolve. We are returning, not to superstition, but to memory. For the first time in recorded history, humans can see the entire planet from above. We can map submerged ruins, detect ancient cities through satellite imaging, analyze DNA across continents, decode star charts carved into stone, measure frequencies in ancient architecture, and reconstruct the migrations of peoples who lived before history. This is not coincidence, it is the cycle unfolding. We are witnessing the re-emergence of a world we forgot. The question is, what do we do with this knowledge? We could dismiss it as myth, call it pseudoscience, ignore the patterns, silence the anomalies. That response is easy, comfortable. It preserves the illusion that humanity is young, simple, linear, explainable. Or we could face the truth that our story is vast, cyclical, and mysterious, that we are part of something much older than any textbook suggests, that the past contains warnings, lessons, and knowledge we desperately need. Knowledge of resonance, knowledge of harmony, knowledge of cycles, knowledge of survival, knowledge of who we truly are. Because the farther we look into the past, the more familiar it becomes. We see ourselves curious, inventive, spiritual, reckless, fragile, brilliant. We see our own fears in their flood myths. We see our ambition in their monumental structures. We see our longing for meaning in their cosmologies. And we see our future in their warnings. Perhaps that is the final gift of the forgotten world: perspective. The understanding that civilization is not permanent, that stability is temporary, that knowledge must be preserved in forms that can survive fire, flood, and time, that humanity rises highest not when it dominates the earth, but when it listens to it. The ancients did not fear the sky. They studied it. They did not fear the earth. They harmonized with it. They did not fear cycles. They prepared for them. We fear these things because we believe we are separate, but we are not. We are part of the same story. When we reconnect with that story, when we recognize the ancient patterns, understand the ancient warnings, and embrace the ancient knowledge, we step out of amnesia and back into continuity. Humanity becomes whole again. And maybe that is why all the forgotten civilizations, no matter how distant from each other, taught the same truth in different forms. Humans are more than physical beings. We are carriers of memory. We are the continuation of something vast, something cosmic, something that transcends a single lifetime or a single era. Consciousness itself may be the inheritance of that forgotten world, an inheritance encoded not in books or tablets, but in our very existence. We dream of skies we never saw. We fear floods we never experienced. We long for lands we never visited. We speak myths older than our languages. We carry grief from worlds we do not remember. Where does that come from? Perhaps from the survivors who rebuilt civilization. Perhaps from ancestors who watched their world drown. Perhaps from a consciousness that spans cycles. Perhaps from a memory deeper than history. Or perhaps from the simple truth that nothing is ever truly lost. Not civilizations, not knowledge, not human potential. Everything returns, in fragments, in symbols, in ruins, in intuition. And now, at the threshold of a new age, humanity begins to awaken to its true timeline. The forgotten world is not gone. It is rising again through science, archaeology, cosmology, mythology, and collective curiosity. It rises every time someone questions the official narrative, every time someone looks at an ancient structure and feels that something is missing. Every time someone realizes the past is far older than they were taught. Every time someone senses that history is not a straight line, but a circle, a spiral, a rhythm. We are not discovering the past, we are remembering it. And in that remembrance, something powerful happens. We begin to understand ourselves. We begin to see that our fears, our ambitions, our collapses, and our triumphs are not unique. They are universal human patterns, patterns learned through countless cycles, patterns that guide us toward evolution, not repetition. This is the true legacy of the forbidden world, not the ruins, not the artifacts, not the myths, but the realization that we belong to a story far older and far grander than the narrow slice of time we inhabit. We are the children of survivors, the inheritors of forgotten knowledge, the seeds of civilizations yet to come. And as the cycle turns, as it always does, it is our turn to decide what will be preserved, what will be lost, and what story the next world will inherit from us. The ancients left their warnings in stone. What will we leave behind? The cycle continues. The world remembers. And now, so do we.